All right, good afternoon, period 5. Sorry I could not be there with you today. Today I'm going to conference in the first financial portion of our lecture today. But before we do, please remember to bring in any of your textbooks as soon as possible. So I'll be back tomorrow and I'll start checking books in. The sooner the better. I do not want to be hunting you down in the last week of school. That won't be any fun. Bring back my textbooks so that you guys can graduate on time. Today what you are going to be focusing on is we are starting finances. So for all of you people that aren't good with money, this is your week. We're going to be focusing on two things today. We're going to focus on personal budget calculations. So personal budget activity is complete and student has tracked their weekly expenses. Detail and work provided demonstrates that student will be able to continue tracking and monitoring their expenses throughout their college years. So we're going to start tracking our money. Secondly, you're going to be doing a budgeting activity involving your monthly budget. Both of these are on the single sheet of paper that you should have picked up. If you do not have that handout, please pause the video at this point and go grab that paper. Now, as we go into the lecture for today, college expenses. There are many things you need to start considering. There are 5 main categories you really want to consider when determining how much college will really cost. There is the tuition and fees that many of you are aware of, but there are 4 other categories that many of you have not thought about at this point. You need to consider room and board. That can be upwards of $10,000 a year depending on what city you live in and the state of the dorms that you live in. So don't forget that's going to be an extra amount of money you might not be considering at this point. Secondly, there's books. You got to buy all your textbooks in college, and there's expenses that come with those books. There's your personal expenses. If you want to have a meal out, you got to start budgeting that money into your schedule. And finally, if you are in a car-loving city like Los Angeles or a city that requires you to get a car to that school, transportation is key. So we're going to start by talking about tuition and fees. Please take notes on what you think would be pertinent to yourself. Tuition and fees is the price you pay for taking classes. It's by credit normally, and if you're a full-time student, you usually pay a flat rate for a certain amount of credits. The amount can change based on a couple of things. It can change based on the number of credits. So if you exceed a certain number of credits per semester, you are going to pay a higher fee. So make sure that when you're signing up for classes, you don't exceed that limit unless you intend to. In certain private schools and state schools, whether you are in-state or out-of-state also will impact the tuition, and your academic program will impact your tuition and fees. For example, I was a science major and we had to pay a $70 fee every single quarter in order for lab courses that we took. So keep in mind there are those small fees you do accrue. Here's an example, a breakdown for you. So a public 2-year college might be somewhere around $3,131. Public 4-year college in-state is about $8,000. Public 4-year college for those out-of-state students, you see there's a huge bump up to $21,000. And private schools, they vary, but they tend to be upwards of the $20,000 mark, and that is something to consider. Now, the other expenses to consider are costs for dorm room options and meal plans. Prices will vary depending on the plan that you choose and how much food you truly want to eat. And so make sure to look into the different types of food options that are available at your school, whether you are required to have a meal plan, and what that meal plan will entail, because that might actually be a very cheap way of getting a lot of food. If you live off campus, we will be talking about this more, but you need to factor in other things such as rent, utilities, groceries, furniture, and potentially extra transportation. We will focus this on in future lessons, but just keep that in mind. So, room and board for off-campus, this is printed out. If you'd like a normal breakdown, this is kind of a just general breakdown for the entire year. I would say $7,200 is being very generous, having lived in apartments before, but we'll see. Your breakdown does vary depending on the city that you will live in. Books and supplies really do vary, but a 4-year public university, it's about $1,200 a year. So you're going to be spending about $1,200, depending on the type of classes you're taking, on those books. Now, you can buy used textbooks. Some great places that you'll want to write down. Amazon is great. So Amazon.com, you can usually find some good used ones. And there's a place that eBay runs known as half.com. I bought most of my textbooks on that website during my college years, and they're very, very useful. Furthermore, you need to start tracking personal expenses. These include laundry, cell phone bills, eating out, and anything you usually want to spend your money on. If you want to buy that new dress, you need to make sure that you are saving that money to do so, because if you run out of money in your budget, you cannot buy that. And there are certain bills that you have to pay, like if you would like to continue having a cell phone. Finally, if you plan on having transportation, you must factor that into your expenses. And so some examples of standard on-campus expenses are in front of you. There's for California community colleges, there's California State, University of California, and California independent colleges. But as you can see, they are all added up at this point, and the total is truly what you need to be budgeting for. If you notice, on the California Community College, you're only paying $1,000 for actual college. What really begins to add in that money is that room and board and your miscellaneous expenses. So, here's a couple more examples for on-campus, off-campus examples. Living with parents is another example. So take a look at all of those. Now, as you begin to look at this, don't pause the video quite at this point, but you are going to complete a college expenses worksheet. You are going to need to track your expenses for an entire week. So starting today, you need to track your expenses on this handout. This will give you a good way to start extrapolating how much money to put directly into that miscellaneous category, because this is 1 week out of 52 weeks. So whatever you spend in this next week, if you multiply by 52, hey, there's your miscellaneous expenses for the entire year. Now, as we move into our next discussion, we're going to talk about monthly budgeting, because if you budget per month, it's going to save you a lot of time and money. So we're going to calculate your monthly budget based on the tuition fees and room and board costs previously determined for your personal college. So, the very first step number 1, is you need to determine total cost. Determine your total budget and subtract the charged expenses. So, you need to determine tuition and fees, books, rent, etc., that big number that's going to be your total cost. So that cost that we talked about before, that total number, you need to figure out a general number for what you think is a good ballpark. Everything that is left is available for your living expenses. So, when we look at this, at Boston University, the average student budget is $60,332 a year. Tuition and fees are $42,000. Books are $1,374. So subtracting these two amounts from the total budget leaves $16,000, and then when we divide this number by 9, we get that many dollars per month. So essentially, you look at the average amount that you want to spend for the entire year, break it down over 9 months for a school year, and you'll be good to go. Now, you need to start tracking. After you know the amount of money you can theoretically spend per month, and you need to be realistic, if I know I need to spend $1,781 a month, or that's what I have to play around with, I need to start divvying it up between categories. A very, very, very good tool is to create a budget on a place known as Mint.com. So this is probably the best tool that I can tell you to use. Let me see if I have my internet open. I do not, so I can't show you at this point in time. But Mint.com has a wonderful, wonderful app that you can download to your phone. We'll spit out some lovely charts, and as you can see, this person in this example has $908 in spending, but as you can see, $517 went to food. So if you're trying to shrink your budget, you can try to shrink that food budget first, because it's the biggest part of the donut hole. It can really give you a way of noticing where you're spending a lot of money and where you can maybe spend some more money. Finally, you need to plan ahead. Make the most of your money by planning out your expenses. If you just leave it up to chance, you're not going to have a lot of money left behind. In order to help you with this, you need to complete the budget scenario activity. So, 2 things that you need to do today, and I'll put numbers so that I can help you out. Number 1, complete the college expenses worksheet. And number 2, complete the budget scenario activity. If you have finished both of these, then you may move on to completing other portions of the binder that are not finished at this point in time. You should have all 4 academic activities done, and you should have the budgeting activities, those 2 on that sheet of paper, done by the time I return with you on Wednesday. If all of those are finished, you are on track to get this portfolio in on time and with an A. Please email if you have any questions. I'm here to help. Let me know if you have any other questions, and have a great day, everyone.